Part 1. Rain slid down the narrow windows of the Greyhound bus as it pulled into the terminal in a small Ohio town that most people only noticed when they were lost. Maya Carter pressed her forehead lightly against the glass, watching neon lights blur into soft streaks. She was 29, exhausted, and carrying everything she owned in one faded suitcase. 2 months earlier she had been living in Chicago, planning a wedding, believing she finally understood what happiness looked like. Then one phone call shattered that picture. Her fiancé, Daniel, had been killed in a late-night accident caused by a drunk driver. The wedding dress still hung in her closet back home, untouched, like a cruel joke. Maya hadn't known where else to go. Her mother had passed years ago, her father even earlier, and Chicago felt unbearable. Every street corner carried a memory. So she bought the cheapest bus ticket she could afford and came here, to a town where no one knew her story. She told herself she only needed a fresh start, but deep down she was just running from the pain. The bus doors hissed open. Cold air rushed in, sharp and unforgiving. Maya stepped out and pulled her coat tighter, her breath forming pale clouds. The terminal smelled of coffee, damp concrete, and old newspapers. She sat on a metal bench and stared at her suitcase, wondering what to do next. She had enough money for maybe 2 weeks in a cheap motel. After that, she didn't know. Across the terminal, an elderly man struggled to lift a box onto a cart. The box slipped from his hands and burst open, scattering canned goods across the floor. A few people glanced over and kept walking. Maya hesitated. Her heart felt heavy, as if even small movements required effort. But something, maybe habit, maybe instinct, pushed her up from the bench. She knelt down and started gathering the cans. "Here, let me help," she said softly. The man looked surprised, then relieved. He had kind eyes, watery blue, and a face carved by years of sun and wind. "Thank you, miss. These old hands don't listen like they used to." They worked in silence for a moment. When they finished, the man smiled. "Name's Frank. I run the little food pantry 2 blocks from here." "Maya," she replied. Saying her name aloud felt strange, as if she were reminding herself she still existed. Frank studied her face, not intrusively, but with quiet attention. "You new in town?" "Yes. Just arrived." "Well, welcome. If you're hungry, the diner across the street makes a decent meatloaf. And if you ever need a warm meal, our pantry serves soup on Thursdays." Maya nodded, unsure why his simple kindness made her throat tighten. "Thank you." She watched him wheel the cart away, then picked up her suitcase again. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. She crossed the street to the diner Frank mentioned, the bell above the door chiming as she stepped inside. The smell of fried onions and fresh coffee wrapped around her like a blanket. She slid into a booth near the window. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a gentle smile, handed her a menu. "Coffee." "Yes, please." As Maya sipped the hot bitterness, she felt something inside her loosen just a little. She ordered the cheapest item, barely tasting it as she ate. Her mind kept drifting back to Daniel, his laugh, the way he used to leave sticky notes on the fridge with bad jokes. The pain rose suddenly, sharp and unexpected. Tears blurred her vision. She lowered her head, hoping no one would notice. The waitress returned, quietly refilling her cup. She didn't say anything, just placed a small napkin on the table and gave Maya's shoulder a gentle squeeze before walking away. That simple gesture broke something open. Maya's tears slipped free, silent and uncontrollable. She cried for the life she lost, for the future that vanished, for the exhaustion of carrying grief alone. When she finally looked up, the diner felt calmer, as if the world had slowed down to let her breathe. She paid and stepped back outside. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the pavement shining. Maya checked into a run-down motel at the edge of town. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet, but it was warm. She set her suitcase down and sat on the bed, staring at the blank wall. That night, sleep came in fragments. She dreamed of Daniel calling her name, always just out of reach. The next morning, she walked aimlessly through town. That's when she noticed a handwritten sign taped to a lamppost: "Volunteers needed, community food pantry." She thought of Frank and the cans rolling across the terminal floor. She didn't know why, but she walked toward the address listed. The pantry was small, housed in an old brick building. Inside, shelves were stacked neatly with donated food. Frank looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Maya, what a surprise." I saw the sign," she said. "I don't have much going on right now. I thought maybe I could help." Frank nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "We can always use an extra pair of hands." For the next few hours, Maya stocked shelves, packed bags, and greeted people who came through the door. Some smiled, some avoided eye contact, some carried stories in their eyes that looked painfully familiar. A young mother thanked her repeatedly for a bag of groceries. An older woman squeezed her hand and said, "God bless you." Maya felt something unfamiliar stir inside her. It wasn't happiness, exactly, but it wasn't emptiness either. For the first time since Daniel's death, the hours passed without her constantly checking the clock, without counting the minutes until the pain overwhelmed her. As she left the pantry that afternoon, the sun broke through the clouds. Maya paused on the sidewalk, letting the warmth touch her face. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in weeks, the future didn't feel completely dark. Part 2. Days turned into weeks. Maya began volunteering at the pantry almost every day. Frank introduced her to others in the community, people who had lived in the town their entire lives, carrying quiet strength and worn-down hope. She learned their names, their habits, their unspoken struggles. And without realizing it, they learned hers too. One afternoon, a teenage boy named Lucas started coming in regularly. He was thin, guarded, and always kept his hood up. Maya noticed how he lingered near the shelves, pretending to read labels even after his bag was full. One day, she asked gently, "Are you waiting for someone?" Lucas shrugged. "My mom works late. I just don't like going home alone." Maya nodded, understanding more than she let on. She began saving him a cup of soup, sitting with him at the small table near the window. They talked about school, music, and dreams Lucas didn't believe he was allowed to have. Each conversation stitched something small but meaningful inside her heart. At night, the grief still visited. Some evenings were harder than others. Maya would lie on the motel bed, clutching Daniel's old hoodie, crying until her chest ached. Healing wasn't a straight line, it was a slow, uneven path filled with setbacks. But now, when the pain surged, she also remembered the smiles at the pantry, the warmth of shared meals, the way kindness could quietly exist alongside sorrow. One morning, Frank asked her, "Ever think about staying?" The question startled her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I didn't plan this far." He smiled knowingly. Sometimes the best plans are the ones we don't make. A week later, the pantry faced a crisis. A major donor pulled out unexpectedly, and supplies ran dangerously low. Frank looked tired, worry etched deep into his face. "I don't know how we're going to get through this month," he said. Maya felt a familiar knot of helplessness tighten in her chest. Then she remembered something Daniel used to say, "When things fall apart, look for what you can build." She took a deep breath. "What if we organize a community drive? I can help spread the word." They worked tirelessly. Maya made flyers, talked to local businesses, posted online. The response surprised everyone. People showed up with bags of food, boxes of supplies, even small envelopes of cash. The diner across the street donated meals for volunteers. The waitress hugged Maya when she recognized her. "Looks like you found your place," she said. On the day of the drive, the pantry buzzed with energy. Laughter echoed through the room. For the first time in a long while, Maya felt something bloom inside her chest that resembled pride, not in herself alone, but in what people could do together. That evening, after the doors closed, Frank handed Maya a small envelope. "Open it." Inside was a modest check and a handwritten note from the pantry board, offering her a paid position as coordinator. Maya stared at it, stunned. Tears filled her eyes again, but these felt different, lighter, warmer. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Frank replied gently. Maya accepted. She moved out of the motel into a small apartment near the pantry. She painted the walls a soft, hopeful yellow. On the windowsill, she placed a framed photo of Daniel, not as a reminder of what she lost, but of what shaped her. Months passed. One crisp autumn evening, Maya stood outside the pantry, watching volunteers lock up. Lucas ran up to her, waving a report card. "I got an A in English," he said, grinning. "That's amazing," she laughed, pulling him into a quick hug. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya felt a quiet understanding settle in her heart. Pain had not disappeared. It probably never would, but it no longer owned her. Through kindness, given and received, her grief had transformed. It had softened into empathy, into purpose, into a bridge that connected her to others. Later that night, Maya sat by her window, looking out at the calm street. She whispered Daniel's name, not in despair, but in gratitude. Loving him had taught her how deep joy could go. Losing him had taught her how deep compassion could grow. Her story hadn't ended with heartbreak. It had expanded, woven with tears and triumph, sorrow and hope. And as the quiet town slept, Maya knew she was exactly where she needed to be, carrying forward a kindness strong enough to hold both pain and light.